Yeah, it was of course quite an announcement yesterday that we were winner of this category. I would like to help you through a story that took us about 5 years, 6 years, and that was for us also quite a special experience. It was the first time that, in fact, we fully initiated a project since we knew about a quite special tender in Amsterdam on the harbor front. It was about a new hotel that also had to add something to the neighborhood, highly sustainable, and they wanted to have a new concept. There's a bit of a ban on hotel at the moment, but since this plot of land had a planning permit of only hotels, so here it was in fact the only thing you could do. But again, the municipality is a bit reluctant of giving new permits on this. The interesting thing is why we really wanted to do this is because it is an area with a really interesting history. Here the ships left for the east, for Indonesia, for many centuries. So there are quite a few stories about the people leaving here and never returning. Also the soldiers left here, the post boat, etc. And you know, it's called island. The island is called Java Island, the main island of Indonesia, you could say. So we wanted to do something with that history, and we said, who can have a hotel that is really also something extra for the neighborhood, and that brings in a new idea of a hotel concept. So we asked Westcoast Hotels, because they also own the Hotel New York in Rotterdam, where the ships left for the west. The boats left to New York, many people left Holland. Here the ships left for the east. So we said it's really an amazingly sort of complementary, a nice connection. And since Westcoast only wants to have hotels that are on the waterfront, because they are big sailors, they like to sail, so they always want to approach their hotels by boat as well. So this is, in fact, the history of the place. And what we started with is sort of bringing in this ship again, simply also because the plot was exactly outlined, what the envelope was exactly given. So you couldn't build less, and you're not allowed to build more. So you end up with this sort of ship form here as well. And as you see, the question was, what can you do? And on this plot, the best thing probably is to team up with the Hortus Botanicus, who has also a history of 400 years with Indonesia, and the Tropical Institute, the Tropical Museum, that also deals with a long, long history. So we teamed up with those partners, and we asked them to join us and to come up with this proposal for Westcoast Hotels. So what we in the end got was a team in a very early stage, starting up with, okay, what is a sustainable hotel? How can we deal with that? And so the best thing was to come up with an idea of a prefabricated wood module that we could stack up to the limited height that we had here. So within about 5 to 6 weeks, we made this concept, and what in fact has never happened to us is it didn't change at all in the coming 5 years that we engineered all of this. So as you see here, it is in fact more of a social project as well with the neighborhood. So we teamed up with many people from the neighborhood as well that nowadays work at the hotel. We built a ground floor that is fully accessible for the neighborhood, and that has wellness, swimming pools. You can just buy a ticket. The bakery for the neighborhood, because there are not a lot of services on the island. And we connected even. We tried to connect even the 5 gardens that you already have, the 5 inner gardens of the building blocks. We added, let's say, the 6th garden, which is now the subtropical garden of our Hotel Jakarta. So this completely open ground floor that connects on all different levels near the bridge, halfway the bridge, and also on the lower lying quay, to the neighborhood for everybody, not just for tourists. As you see here, this is in fact what we came up with during that tender, and this is also what we built. So you see from the swimming pool, you go to the wellness, bakery, banqueting hall, in the middle of the subtropical garden, and then the restaurants and bars in the tip of the block. Interesting thing is that if you work like this and you have those partners and you know that you're going to build in wood, a circular building, built with 2,300 cubic meters of CLT and finishing off with about 1,200 cubic meters of bamboo for floors, ceilings, walls, etc. The interesting thing is that dealing with that brings you a completely different building and brings you also a completely different way of working that we really have embraced and that we really like to continue in future projects. So what you see here are some images from the ground floor. That is like almost a completely open landscape. There are no separations except for the banqueting hall and the swimming pool. And here you see the big restaurant with the oyster bar in the tip. So in the end, I think the project has come out much better than we expected in the beginning. We thought you have to compromise on those elements, but we've been extremely lucky that the client also went through the whole process and said, okay, I'm going to do this extra thing. Here you see how the ground floor, the concrete basement with parking and the table structure where all the amenities are complemented by 174 identical wooden units, 2 types of rooms, and then we had to add the last 26 that are built in situ because in the sharp tip and on the corners we were not able to use those prefab elements. So it's quite amazing to see that the traditional way of building took us about a year on site, and then finishing it with the 175 rooms took us about 18 days on site. So you see that there's also a completely different way of the whole building site and sound, CO2 pollution, all those things. This is the element that we engineered together with a structural engineer. There's a lot to do with, of course, fireproofing and things like that. It has triple glazing, so it's like a passive module, and that was brought in all fixed, stacked up, and then we just had to cover it with one skin for wind and waterproofing, which is the 4th layer. So it's a quadruple glazing in the very end. Rooms, since it is a prefab module, which is normally a product that is seen as being cheap, being temporary, we said if we're going to do this, it has to be better than traditional building, not less. So we used a special CLT timber structure with the last planks, structural planks built from Weisstanne, which is a very nice pine. We used concrete, a very thin concrete floor for the fireproofing between the units, and all of that was stacked without any additional structure. So it's the wood walls bring it up to 30 meters, whereas of course the first 6 meters is the table structure that it is built on. So here you see the rooms. And we, in the end, were very happy that this last skin, which is the 4th layer of glass with the PV cells, so it's completely energy neutral now, 1,700 square meters of PV. The last layer of glass is completely transparent, has no coatings, and therefore the wood structure is also very much visible from the outside, which is normally not the case if you build with, this fully coated triple glazing. It's too much to explain you all of this, but this is, let's say, the whole holistic idea of building and of energy savings. This is the technical layer. The last 2 meters is completely full of the whole PV installations, etc. I think I'm done, more or less. Thank you very much.
Questions? Leslie, I saw you writing a lot. You probably have a question.
Several questions. I was kind of interested in this relationship between the East and West, the sort of travel metaphor that you came up with. And the building has a curious quality. It's both kind of northern and tropical at the same time. How did you conceive of the relationship between these two, let's say, atmospheres? I mean, it's almost as if the building has two kind of microclimates.
Sorry, I didn't hear your first...
You talked about the relationship between the East and West travel.
Yeah.
And this building is both kind of temperate and tropical in the same breath.
Yes.
How did you conceive conceptually of this relationship between a far place and here?
Yeah, at first we didn't know exactly what to do with this idea of the connection to the east, because we were not about to make a Indonesian hotel. Mm-hmm. I think we're not the people that should do a thing like that. But for us, it was important to make the connection and to show, and that's also why the Tropical Museum has now a dependance here and shows its art and all the things that we have collected in the last 400 years in the hotel. The second thing is that what is really good, since it's a wooden hotel, you need a certain kind of humidity. And with a subtropical garden, that works perfect, because that's a climate. You could say every plant that you have in a house, in your house, is more or less a subtropical species. But with the Hortus botanicus, we took only plants from Java. And as I said, quite a few people from the neighborhood now work here. But it also turns out that it has attracted quite a few people from Indonesia who want to work here. So it also it came later in a way, this sort of connection.
Okay, interesting.
The last thing is the bamboo. We were quite surprised that to meet the requirements of this highly sustainable BREEAM building, we were looking for products that are extremely strong. And then it turned out that bamboo was very good for the floors, ceilings, walls, things like that. So in the very first 3-4 weeks that we made this tender, that was actually a thing we didn't realize yet.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay. Quiet. So this whole idea of hotel and neighborhood, you spent quite some space also on this garden and this atrium. There's always a pressure, I guess, between the amount of rooms that you should make and the lobby and all the other spaces that you make. Yeah. How was that organized here programmatically?
Yeah, especially the pressure on the ground floor was also quite high. Yeah. Because we have a lot of public functions in there. But the good thing is that the awkward form of the plot has helped us in a way. We were not able to have 2 times a double corridor, so 2 rooms on both sides of the corridor. But the plot is also too thin to have that on both sides. So in a way, we opened up that corridor and had this tropical garden in the middle. So it's sort of a leftover space, but then one that we could really use in a way. What we did with the rooms is, indeed, 200 rooms was almost not possible in here, because hoteliers like to have rooms that have a certain width. But we were happy to convince the client to make quite narrow rooms. So we found out that, first of all, for transport, 3.5 is more or less the maximum to just transport without any special guidance. So that's the cheapest way of transporting. So we stayed within 3.5 meters width. And since they want to have fairly big rooms, and the average in Amsterdam is 18 square meters, the rooms here, as the client wanted, was 30 square meters. And then we said, if you make a somewhat narrower room, you have the advantage that you can make, let's say, 3 parts. One is, of course, the wellness, the bathroom, and where you enter. The second part is where the bed is. But since of the narrowness, you have extra length, and you also have a third part with it, and that is really like a small living room. And normally you have more space around your bed, but then the bed is the central element. And now the bed is not the central element, but it's, let's say, the second part, and then the third part is like an open space. And then an extra here is the balcony. What we did not realize is that we wanted to make this balcony because of the cruise ships here that are quite close by, and the festival terrain that is also here. We wanted to block the sound very well. So we have this fourth layer of glass that you can open or close, creating this balcony. Later on we found out that Amsterdam has no hotels with balconies. So there are no hotel rooms that have a balcony. So that was like a nice extra that we could use.
So, Lee, yeah, you have a question? Frederick? No? So the depth was actually an advantage here.
Yes, in a way, yeah. And also the plots, the form of the plot as well.
Yeah.
That has helped us in a way. Otherwise you probably would have maybe sort of thickened it and had all kinds of surfaces in the middle.
So this BREEAM Excellent, I think it is.
Yeah.
Yeah. Was it there right from the start, or?
That's how we submitted the tender documents. So I must say that this was also a tender where the municipality has helped us quite a lot, because they have been extremely strict on what you promise, that you also build it. We've seen that quite different often, but this time it was an amazing sort of help for us to really stay tuned with what we had envisaged in the very first place.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much.